Thanks for coming back. I appreciate you swinging in today, and I wanted to go ahead and talk about, continue talking a little bit about the writing and the reading part of when I see things in pictures and those sorts of things. I thought there would be warrant a little bit more conversation about how that works and how it applies, because somebody that's not understanding that right off would have a little bit of time that would need to absorb this and how that would actually apply and work. And actually, what is that when you say I see things in pictures? Well, when the part of the brain is processed from a non-dyslexic person, the brain is more operating up in the front, let's say, in the lobes. And then when we, from the dyslexic side of things, we work from the back side of the brain in an area of the brain completely on the opposite side of where a non-dyslexic person would be operating from the brain. And then the understanding is that it's about 5 times as much energy being used to process, like a dyslexic person processing is 5 times more than it would take for a non-dyslexic process their way. And so when you look at those two elements alone, or that one element alone, that's quite a bit. I mean, when you're talking about 3 to 5 times, I guess what it might be. If you're talking about that much time extra it takes to process, that's a great deal of time to process things in our world. And so that kind of lends into some of the things that you go through when you're in school, when you're taking tests and those sorts of things, when you're trying to read that. And I'm going to go into that a little bit here in a few minutes about how pictures and those pictures in your minds are reacting to you when you were trying to process it in a taking of a test, for example. But I thought I'd give you just a little bit of an idea about this visual side of things for us, because when we work with those words, we see those words in our minds, like I mentioned before: truck, tree, house, bus. Those things are all in our minds. They're all things that we see in our mind, so those are easy. Like I mentioned the other day, those are nouns, and nouns we have because nouns are things that we can put a picture to. It's those connecting words that do not have the ability that provides a picture, like it and those and and yeses and nos and those sorts of things. And the other day I kept running across the word will, W-I-L. I kept leaving that word out. Well, I couldn't see it. You know, how do you see that word will? I can see the spelling of the word will, but I can't see a picture that associates with what will means. So that's one of those kind of words that are going to escape you and not see that. But as in the writing, as far as your writing goes, when you're writing this stuff out, those pictures are the basis of your beginning of it. And as mentioned before, then you go ahead and you reread that sentence. And sometimes I have situations where I change it from a plural or a singular to a plural, or a plural to a single. Because once I get I start out in a singular fashion, then I get on the other side of the sentence, and it turns into a plural, and then I got to go back and change the beginning of the sentence to match it in the end of the sentence. I do that quite often as I in my writing goes, that I would change from a plural to a singular, or a singular to a plural in my writing, and that's because my mind changes directions at will. Sometimes it's uncontrollable when you're looking at this, and you just got to pull your mind back, because you have to almost sometimes take control of things a little bit in your mind in order to get you off these little tracks that you might get onto just because of the attention deficit that I have, which is uncontrollable in its own right. Those mind travels or daydreams that take you away from your whatever you're doing at the time. Those daydreams remove you and take you away from the topic at the same time you're reading it. So it's very, very confusing to some, but to somebody like me, I understand it very well. So getting an idea of just going back and reviewing these sort of things is kind of helpful to you to understand some of the things we work with when we're doing these sort of things. Now I want to go on and talk a little bit about reading. So when you're, reading is And when I read, I need like dead silence. I remember in high school, I had to shut everything down. And I remember in my first year in college, I was in the dormitories, and I had to go out. I put a bunch of stuff cotton down on my ears, and I remember going into nurses and they have it flushed out, and all the stuff that came out of my ear when it got flushed was amazing. I'll never forget that. But I will never forget the fact is the purpose of why I had to get flushed was because I was shutting out all the noises in those in the dormitories that I lived in. Because here's what I think happens when you hear people talking and those sorts of things. You're hearing John next door or even your roommate in the room making comments or talking away. What's going on is when they're saying these words, those words are coming into your mind, and you're seeing they're talking about trees, trucks, and buses and houses and stuff like that. Well, those words are probably popping up in your mind, and that's how I feel when other people are talking in the room, or you've got a song that's kind of like a talkie song, or you just got voices where the TV's on. I can't concentrate because what's going on? Those words are creating pictures in my mind, and it's overtaking what I'm trying to do, and the concentration's not there. That's how I see that. I feel that that's what happens, is when you're hearing those external noises, they are interrupting your mind, and the pictures are now being controlled in your head by an outside source. That's how I see it. That's how I feel it is. God knows what the truth is about something like that. But right now, being a dyslexic person I think there's value to that thought and how that could possibly be true. Okay, so that is something I think I needed to get out there a little bit. So what I do today, I put on, I usually go into Pandora relaxation music. It's a lot of piano playing, very, just low-keyed, drifty stuff. If they do any singing, it's very low and very, very minimal. So it doesn't interrupt my psychic, my part of my mind that's going to be triggering these pictures, these things that could prohibit me from doing my creativity when I'm trying to write. Okay, so some of that kind of music, low-keyed stuff, is effective. I listen to that every day, in the background of things I do, because it soothes and makes me, it brings me into the right reflective mind, the mind's sake. So that's kind of helpful. So please take that and use that as you can. Other things I do is like I wanted to talk about the test questions and going back into, when you're taking a test, and I remember in high school you get all these aptitude tests, and these are all timed tests, so it's not like you've got all day to do this stuff, but a person in my perspective who's got to read a question, I guarantee you every question that I read is read minimum 2 to 3 times before that question gets answered. That's if I get lucky and am able to find a decipher in that question within that 2 to 3 reads. Okay, some of the problems I got when I first read that stuff is the words that are missed. Okay, so when we miss words in there on the first read, we know we missed something because things aren't sounding right in there, so you go back and you reread it and you find that word in there that, for example, a word that might say the opposite, like and, or those kinds of words that are easily missed that could really change the purpose of the sentence itself. There are words that will change things and make the meaning different because you read it wrong, or you didn't see the word on the first read. You reread it, you catch it, because it didn't sound right on the first read. It didn't make sense. So you go back and you read it, and now you caught that word that you didn't see before. And then on a third read, you're able now to hopefully make a decision on the answer of the question. And because you got to move along, and your timing is running out, so you got to do the best you can. And so when you think about taking tests, the reason why they do today, they allow dyslexic people to take a longer time, is why? Because they reread that question 2 or 3 times before they can even answer the question. And that's if they're lucky to get it on the third read and be able to answer the question and still answer the question right, because that's still got to be right. You still got to get it right. So those things are kind of things that I reflect back on that can be helpful to a lot of people. Here's a good example of some things when I run into, as a current adult, when I'm been in a lot of Ace Hardwares and Home Depots, and you've got all the goodies on the rack. Okay, you've got just multiple things on the rack, and those kind of things are just very distracting to somebody like us because it's a visual thing. So remember, when you're talking about a dyslexic person, you're talking visual. They see things visually, so they're very, very visual. So you see that stuff on the rack, and you're trying to find something on that rack, and for some reason or another, that stuff is just very difficult to find things. There are better days than none, and then there are better days than some and others when I do this stuff. But I find when I get into a confusing moment and things aren't working so well, and I'm really having a lot of trouble finding what I want on a rack, I'll have to start going left to right on top, left or right, and come down the rack so I can keep organized so I don't go back through other areas I've already seen. This is in order to keep myself organized in order to find the item I'm after. So these things become perceptual things out there. They're very, when you think about, I don't think about this stuff until now that I'm starting to talk about it more, but those are just things that I go through on a daily basis as if I'm in a store, and you may not have those difficulties, but when I see all this stuff there, all this information, same thing with the website. When you get on websites, you got all these choices. I hate 15 choices, because when you get on a website, you're trying to figure out how to work with somebody else's mousetrap, and that's about all it is, and it takes a lot of time for me to go through all these steps and stages in order to see the functionality of that and how it runs down the line and how it gets from point A to point B. It is kind of difficult to do those sort of things. So those kind of things become very difficult for somebody like me. At least in my perspective, it becomes difficult when I'm trying to look at stuff that's been kind of right out there, and it becomes a headache to some degree. So I wanted to run that stuff by you one more time, a little bit about the pictures and things of that nature, because it's hard to explain to others that don't understand when I say that we turn things into pictures, and when we do that, that's that's critical to us to master what we do. But there are things that I notice that when the words that I can't see a picture to, like the word will, W-I-L. Okay, well, we memorize the word spelling will, so I can see the words W-I-L in my mind. Okay, so I can see that, but there's no picture to the word that exemplifies will. Okay, so like it would be like a truck. I can picture the truck, but I can't picture the will. But I can picture how to spell will because I've memorized the spelling of it. So when I say will, I can see W-I-L-L in my mind, and that's exactly what it is. I just see the words written out, will, like the, T-H-E. I see that in my mind. As I say it, I see the spelling of the words, okay? Because those are concrete items. Those are items that I can put a picture to, which is the word T and the word H and the word E. Okay, so those are simple to do, but as far as seeing the word as you're applying it in a sentence is a whole different word, and I'm calling these connecting words in the middle of all the words that you can see, like the house, truck, bus, those kind of words. Those are, nouns. But just to get a little bit of feet wet with this sort of a topic, there are other websites out there that talk about this aspect of it. I do photography as a hobby, and I've been doing that for 45 years. I've been dyslexic for approximately 22 years. So when I understand the reasons for photography in my life, I really understand why I drifted to that, because I see things in pictures all the time. So that's exactly what I went to, was that, because that's a representation of me. Photography is a way to express myself, and because that's how I see it in my mind. Everything is a picture anyway, so that's very unique, but to say the least, this is kind of how it works. And it is what it is, because without proper education or proper, people looking at my situation, or me going in and being worked on, let's say like my son was, and that's a story I should tell you too, is that when you do get, treatment, there are pluses to that. The story of my son is that when he was like 6 or 7 years old, and I started seeing these symptoms of dyslexia. He was showing all the signs of dyslexia, and so we took him into the school system, and they just sat there and told us, no, we don't see this. We don't. It's our feeling is that this is not the case. So we fought with it. But so we end up taking him out to a third party. One of our friends is a teaching expert, and she brought us into this group. And well, anyways, in 3 months worth of training, and 3 or 6 months, I can't remember these days. But anyways, they came back with the saying that he had an eye that wasn't tracking and keeping up with the other eye. And so they strengthened his reading skills, and they said it was magnificent how his one eye was doing all this work, where this other eye is not. Okay, so anyways, so they determined that it was just a slow one eye tracking problem. Well, 10 years later, my friend who's a special education teacher comes back and mentions to me, I wanted to let you know that diagnosis that your son got a few years back, they have discovered that they've been misdiagnosing that, and it actually has been disability, dyslexic disability, and not eye tracking issues. Okay, so now I felt a little more comfortable. The fact is, I probably was right when I felt that my son's symptoms were of dyslexia. So today, he still does not believe he's dyslexic. Okay, now that's a good and a bad thing. And the good part about it is that he's not prohibited from the fear of dyslexia because he doesn't think he has it. Okay, that's the good thing. The bad part about it is that if you know you have it, then and you know what skill levels you have and what some of the downsides are to it, that you're able to proactively understand it better by learning more about what you have and learning about it more and able to operate with it. So that would be the downside of it. But if he can pull through on the other side of being fearless with it, then I truly believe that he'll be okay and may not suffer. But I guess maybe the point of this whole conversation would be with my son would be that his training, his skill of reading was increased, and he got help. And so there's a big benefit on that side of it. And if he feels that he is not dyslexic because he's kind of created some skill levels that doesn't take him down that path of discomfort, let's say, like it is for me, he may do well just by skipping over that part of that dyslexic groundwork down there that's underlying there. Still there though, but if his achievement level over that is greater than his level of what truly is there underground, he will be fine. But I still think, in general sense, it's better to know than not to know that you have this. But anyways, I want to leave you with that thought, and this is pretty much, I believe, our session number 4. Again, this is Roger Ottaway, and I wanted to thank you for taking the moment to listen to what I had to say about this topic, because I think everybody has to, if you talk about it, then things change, and I think that's the grand idea that I have, is that I want to contribute to the topic, and I think I should, because I have a unique story, and the success I've had in my life is part of that unique story, and it all began prior to being, knowing I was dyslexic. I did everything without understanding it. So now I want to share some of that with others and letting them know that you're not alone. Thank you for joining me today.